Speaking of which, Yoystan, we were picking your brain about everything Rings of Power. What did you think of House of the Dragon Season 2? Because I'll say this. So for Seasons 1, House of the Dragon and Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, they're kind of neck and neck, and I would say House of the Dragon won that battle. This time around, I still think House of the Dragon Season 2 won that battle, but I think barely. Because Season 2, Rings of Power got a little better, and I think House of the Dragon Season 2 went down a little bit. So if we keep going on this trajectory where House of the Dragon keeps going down and Rings keeps going up, by Season 4, they would have switched places completely.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. House of the Dragon, I think, was a bit better. It was slow too, though, right? It was slow, but you care. It's like in moments, it was like a slow burn of where you care about the characters for the most part. You care about their connections to each other a little bit. They don't seem as Elrond and Galadriel are a perfect example of this, where their relationship was so like in a flux, where all of a sudden they're like, they don't like each other. Elrond's like, let's go, and whatever, right? Who cares? And then they kiss later, and it's like, what? The relationships, I feel like, in House of the Dragon stay consistent, and then they grow upon themselves. Even in kind of the slower moments. I mean, Damon at Harrenhal just taking his sweet time, we'll say. We at least see that he's growing in his mindset of how he's approaching Rhaenyra. So, yeah, I
think there could be an argument that Alicent is pretty inconsistent in season 2, and that no one in Rings of Power, except the ones people being tempted by rings, act that insane.
That's fair. Yeah, that's a good point.
But you are right that the emotional House of the Dragon has the emotional connections, in spades, and so we kind of all know that there's a little bit of cardboard to the Rings of Power cast and the Rings of Power acting, and so that while House of the Dragon has just top-notch actors.
Exactly. I don't know, Rings of Power, and maybe it's just because I know and I love the lore, and so it feels, how they're doing it just feels so youthful in a sense to me, where it's like innocent. I feel like when I'm watching Rings of Power that I'm watching like a school play, and when I'm watching House of the Dragon, I'm watching an actual show.
Right. Or, I mean, it feels like the way it's directed and acted, it feels like a theatrical movie, like, versus, a school play. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Because like the school play, right? You're rooting for it. You want it to be good. But you're like, at the end of the day, I'm here because my kid's in it. I'm here because it's Lord of the Rings. Like,
my kid's in it.
like I wouldn't be at the school play if my kid wasn't. I wouldn't be watching the show if it wasn't. You're
trying to say Theo is your son, and you're going to see Theo.
Exactly. I gotta see it. But I wouldn't want to watch it if I was just by myself, right? And I had anything else to do. Right. But House of the Dragon, I willingly watched, and I kept watching throughout. And I was like, yeah, I mean, it wasn't as heavy hitting, I thought, as season 1, but obviously you have the giant, really the first battle between all the dragons and stuff. And I thought that was pretty well done in episode 3, but it didn't really pay off too much yet. I feel like next season they're really building up all the battles. Hopefully they kind of overdid the play between characters now. They overdid the dialogue scenes a bit much here. Hopefully in season 3 they don't overdo the combat and the battles, because we almost had none of that in this season.
Yeah, this season was all about gathering soldiers, and which is funny because the first half, this is something I spoke to Preston about ad nauseum on our channels. The first half I thought was great. Episode 1, great starter. Episode 2, brilliant episode. It was all talking, but that's all Game of Thrones has ever been. And it was great. Episode 3 was fine. I hated that whole ending with Alicent and Rhaenyra. Episode 4, the dragon battle, that was a good payoff to setting up 3 episodes of them, everyone gathering together. Yeah. And then the latter half of the season had some troubles because HBO cut the episodes. But for the most part, latter half of the season it wasn't good. I wouldn't say it's the whole thing was bad. It just wasn't good. Episode 7 was great, but episode 8, whew, that's Rings of Power level bad. Preston, like, in hindsight?
We are kind of spoiled too. Like, I'm kind of thinking like, okay, if the year were 2003 and Rings of Power came out, people would be like, this is the best show that's ever been on TV. So let's like, you know,
it's true.
We do have these expectations where we're like, oh, it feels like a school play. Do we remember what fantasy was like? Do you remember Xena Warrior Princess and Hercules, the legend continues?
Yeah, of course.
See, for me, all I've known are the Peter Jackson movies, right? I'm in that generation. So I've grown up spoiled, right? And also, I mean, with House of the Dragon, to be fair, Game of Thrones spoiled me too. It's like the first 4 seasons, amazing. And so House of the Dragon, neither season in my mind has really hit what Game of Thrones seasons 1 through 4 are. And in my mind, I'm curious what you guys think about this. House of the Dragon suffers more from the issue of being a prequel than I think Rings of Power does. Like, Galadriel and Elrond, like, you could be like, oh, that's not who they are, and it's not who they become, right? But at least this is thousands of years before. But if I have to hear but the prince that was promised, I swear, dude, after knowing that Arya or whatever was the prince, ended up killing the Night King, like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, part of it is just the massive time difference, but also, like, in Rings of Power. There's just so many characters that we know nothing about. Like, we know nothing about, like, who Arendir is and, like, where he's going. So that's kind of exciting. Yeah. But also, I think, and even though you don't like it when they break from lore, because they've broken from lore, you're not quite sure where they're going, you know? Like, and granted, it's the same, like, when House of the Dragon, like, breaks from canon, like, breaks from what they're doing in Fire and Blood. It's a little exciting because you're like, well, what are they doing with that?
I like that too. And obviously, I mean, like, even just for the show watchers, like, Joffrey spoiled Rhaenyra's death in season 3 or 4 of Game of Thrones, right? And so, like, we kind of know what's coming there. But I think what annoys me is it's like they keep trying to make season 8 better, is what it feels like.
Oh yeah, yes.
And I'm like, it's not happening.
I don't know if you saw my tweet on this, but they keep trying to remind us of like the White Walker, like, stop doing that. And this is, we recently watched an interview with someone who works closely with George, Elio Garcia. Even Elio, I don't know if Preston, if you watched that part, even Elio mentions that they should stop bringing back the White Walkers, especially with how
I remember that. Yeah,
that ended. Like, why are you? And this is something that Lord of the Rings, also Rings of Power, also does as well. The House of the Dragon, Rings of Power both have the same problem. Guys, stop reminding us why we should be watching those things instead. Stop doing that.
Right. It's just the constant, like, you know, Han Solo traveling by prime by yourself. Yeah, great. You linked it back. Right.
I made that comparison in one of the Rings of Power reviews as well.
Oh, it's really?
Like, the Han Solo one. Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, this is where he got his blaster from. This is where he got Solo from.
I mean, you're right that they literally did that with Gandalf. Like,
exactly. It feels like this is where he got his stick from. His hat. Like his name, hat's coming.
He couldn't have just been Han Solo. He had to be Han traveling by himself solo. He couldn't just be Gandalf. He had to be Grand Elf Gandalf. There had to be an origin to it.
Yeah, that stuff does bother me. Again, I think when they try to make. And I don't know if this is almost a mandate from HBO for House of the Dragon. They're like, listen, season 8 is now referenced as one of the worst letdowns ever. Try to make it better. Okay? Like, reference it, build up to it a bit more, try to improve season 8, and we'll give you more money. Like, I have no idea if it's like a mandate from HBO to reference Game of Thrones more, but it bothers me because you're not going to make season 8 better. I remember.
Maybe this is like a Star Wars prequel thing, because I think they did like think they've now like referenced Star Wars prequels so much that people like forget that they sucked. Like, you know, like, oh, but we had Clone Wars and everybody loves the Clone Wars. And then we brought back Darth Maul and we had a great battle with him and Obi-Wan in the desert. And if you throw in a bunch of stuff, you'll eventually like accept it and take it.
Maybe that is their goal. It's just overwhelm you with White Walkers and Prince That Was Promised and all this stuff.
Every time I'm like, none of this is showing a you know, little girl jumping out of nowhere stabbing in the Night King. Okay. Like there's
exactly.
there's no prophecy showing all of this. Yep. It's just eggs and it's daggers and daggers. What was it? Fucking daggers and prophecy all the way down.
Yeah. Well, it takes all the mystery, and maybe the show did this anyway, before House of the Dragon, but I loved your videos years ago, Preston, where you thought all the prophecies were BS anyway, right?
Yeah.
That all of that was not they're just red herrings and false flags there for what's coming. And I love that idea, but now the show is like, no, there are prophecies.
It's funny because the show kind of did go that way, that like actually everybody was wrong. The Prince of the Promise was actually just fucking Arya the whole time. Ha ha. But now they're doubling down. Targaryen blood, it's important. Targaryen lineage is important. Why? Because we need to have generations of war in order to have dragons die off, in order to have dragons come back, in order to go north of the wall to save somebody in the middle of a lake and have your dragon get killed by a javelin, brought back from the dead so it can be used to burn a hole in a wall so that all the White Walkers can walk to Winterfell so a little girl can jump out of nowhere to stab one in the heart.
Yeah, that's right. Like, I think that's, I mean, it seems like where the show's prophecies are like headed. It just, and maybe that's the essence of any sort of adaptation onto the screen, is you lose some of that stuff. Again, with Rings of Power, you lose some of the thousands years kind of time skipping and all that.
You brought up a good point. I want to know if this is HBO bringing it down, telling Ryan Condal, the showrunner, try to connect it to season 8, or if that's Condal himself doing that.
I think it's Condal himself, because I'm thinking about the dragon arms.
The dragon arms?
So do you remember? So remember in the show there's 2-legged dragons and then there's 4-legged dragons as the sigil, and then I think I remember Ryan Condal saying that like, oh, that the discrepancy had to come from somewhere, so he made the sigil 4 legs again. And George is like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like,
well, I was going to ask Yoystan about this. Were you paying attention to George's meltdown?
A little bit, not. I know he didn't like season 2. I know.
Actually,
that much but...
you want me to explain it real quick?
Yeah.
So George never outright stated that he didn't like season 2. From what we know, he liked episode 1. He had a problem with the missing kid. He liked episode 2 quite a bit. He didn't say anything on episode 3, but he liked episode 4 quite a bit, and then he stopped. And then he has to go to the UK for some bullshit. And throughout the entire time he's in the UK, we hear rumors that he's been complaining about House of the Dragon season 2 to some of the fellow authors over there. Okay, fine. You know, he comes back and he does this thing called Bubonicon in his state of New Mexico. And he complains about it there too. He's complaining about it to Elio Garcia, who's worked with him before. We're hearing rumors that he's just constantly complaining about season 2. And then at Bubonicon, he says he's going to put out a blog post about it. Okay, cool. We're all waiting. We're all anticipating it. And he fucking drops it. The Toxic Butterflies post. It's up for 30 minutes before it gets deleted. And it's just him basically bitching that he doesn't know what Ryan's doing. He's spoiling stuff for season 3. He's saying that this missing character, the fact that they're missing, it's sending ripple effects down the story. And it's basically him alluding that he doesn't like the direction the show is going. I would fucking love if someone over at the Rings of Power, over for the Tolkien estate, did the same thing. But I'm pretty sure they're probably counting their money. Because I feel as though the only people who really would have cared about lore would have been Christopher, and I think he's gone, right?
So, yeah, there are academics that care a lot. One, if you want the controversy that's most like this for Rings of Power, years ago they brought on a man named Tom Shippey. Tom Shippey's Tolkien scholar, knows a lot more about it than I do. He just loves it. And then he left the project at some point, and no one quite knows why. We don't know if he was told to go, or if he left himself, or if the project was just done. But I do not recall hearing that he came back for season 2. And so it's been kind of my headcanon that something like that happened. It was like, hey man, you are under NDA. Don't say a word. You can leave if you want, but like, do not say a word about the project. And he was like, fine, whatever. You guys are going to screw it up. Like, I have little backing for that, but in my mind, that's probably right, because now we have 2 seasons, and I don't think he helped with the second. But he left early on the first.
The second season was slightly better, so maybe first season was all his fucking fault.
I would doubt that. Tom Shippey. He's a British medievalist, retired scholar of Middle and Old English literature, considered one of the world's leading academic experts on the works of Tolkien, whom he has written several books and many scholarly papers.
Yeah, he would probably the fucking lightning tree thing would probably give him a heart attack. I don't think he could take that.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. Like all the things I complain about, there's no way. There's just, and that was kind of my first sign, right? And my dad was the one to get me into Middle-earth and Tolkien's works. So that really flagged my dad as like, oh, this show's not going to be good. And honestly, yeah, it makes sense that he would have left something like this. Galadriel and Elrond are kissing and orcs have babies now. Like, okay, you guys are just in it for a quick buck, right? Again, I could be wrong, but Amazon's pretty strong about their NDAs, I think. I don't think he helped with season 2, at least not that I know of. So yeah, no one quite knows why he left.
Wasn't there another Tolkien professor? I swear I saw something on Twitter about there was another Tolkien. Are there multiple Tolkien professors or just one guy?
So Tom Shippey's he's kind of like the scholar guy. So there's a guy that goes by the Tolkien professor, and that must be who you saw.
Oh.
The Tolkien professor, Corey Olsen. Right, he does a lot of studies and independent things with Tolkien's works, and he's been pretty friendly with the show. Right, a lot of respect for the guy from me, but I definitely have some disagreements with things. Like for instance, he had this clip where he was talking about Tolkien canon, and he was like, well, Tolkien has so many notes and so many things unpublished and all this. Like, is there really a full, true concept of Tolkien canon? I disagree with that. There is. Tolkien was very specific about his editing process. Now, just because he passed away partway through his publication process, he didn't get the Silmarillion out, his son did, right? That's not on him.
Right.
I think he had very much a canon in mind and then notes surrounding the canon. And,
see, this is very different from George R. R. Martin. I feel like if you pulled out some of George R. R. Martin's notes on something, I would be like, well, that wasn't published. He changes his mind all the time, but Tolkien seemed to plan things out a lot more, and
Yeah, he planned it out, and some of the revisions he never had the chance to make. So, for instance, we mentioned Dagor Dagoroth, right, the Ragnarok event. He never got the chance to go back and re-edit that, so that is in the published Silmarillion. And so I guess it's canon. Again, this is where I do give the Tolkien professor some leeway with his argument. It's like, yeah, you're right, is that canon? Isn't it canon? Who knows? But I always take the most recent word of Tolkien a little bit above his published works, and because he had changes he wanted to make that he just never did. And even Christopher Tolkien made a couple editorial mistakes, right? And it's small things. Again, if there wasn't a canon, I don't think he would care as much about this, but Gil-galad's parentage in the Silmarillion is this character named Fingon, who's the son of Fingolfin, but then in the notes, even his son was like, I made a huge mistake. That's not true. It's Orodreth, who's the son of Finarfin, who's the son, right? It's all of this, or who's the grandson of Finarfin, right? There's this whole lineage debate with Gil-galad's parentage. And so that wouldn't matter if there wasn't a canon. There clearly, in Tolkien's mind, was a canon, I think.
Yeah.
Because otherwise these discrepancies wouldn't matter.
It's also tough when, the author makes a retcon that like you don't like, like what do you do in that? Like, what do you do? You're like, but I don't want to believe that's a change to the canon.
Preston knows all about that with like the Princess and the Queen and Rogue Prince. There's a couple in there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's how I feel about Dagger Daggerath, to be honest. Like, I think that's an awesome connection to like Norse mythology and Revelations and like the Bible and stuff. Like, that's a cool thing, and there's a lot of elements pointing towards that. So to take that out and not being it, But yeah, I mean, it's the author's project.
I'm taking as canon the end of the cartoons where Gandalf turns to the camera and is like, everyone has a little hobbit in them. Do you? And we kind of all accept that like their world has slowly turned into our world. That's
the top canon right there.
That's the top canon. That's the top canon right there.
Is that the one that Christopher Tolkien, he thought the cartoon was better than the movies? Was that true?
I don't know. I haven't.
I mean, the cartoons, in no way do I think they're better than the movie, but I will grant that they capture the vibe, the feeling of the books, I think, that better than the movies. The movies are very self-serious and dour, while the books are not that, and the cartoon is not that. So that's what I'll grant the cartoon, is that it has the same kind of tone as the books.
That's fair. That's fair. The singing and so forth. Yeah.
But besides that,
yeah. Well, and it's kind of funny. I mean, this is a Tolkien kind of thing overall. From what I can tell, J.R.R. Tolkien would be cringing right now to even hear that I have a Lord of the Rings channel, like that I've dedicated so much time to it.
Because Tolkien hated everything, right?
I wouldn't say hated everything, but yeah, he was like, "Why are you guys obsessing over my work?"
I heard. I saw his grandson in an interview, and his grandson admitted like that his grandfather hated everything, and like it's okay, it's fine.
Well, granted, one of his grandsons is working on Rings of Power, so so Rings of Power, Tolkien grandson. He's got a couple, so let me make sure I'm. Simon Tolkien is the grandson of J.R.R. Tolkien and a series consultant on the Amazon.
Let me see if it's the same one, because I'll remember what the guy looked like if he was the one that.
Simon Tolkien.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah. No, it's the same guy.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, he's working on Rings of Power, so I'm throwing out everything he's.
It's the same guy that I saw in the interview.
But I mean, yeah, Tolkien didn't like critics. He didn't like when people obsessed about things. Like, it is what it is. But no, it is funny, kind of the author, and that's not an experience that I've had, right? George R.R. Martin, he's still very alive and well, and he's very active online with his opinion about adaptations of his works. So I do find that interesting that, like, he consults for the show, doesn't he? He consults for House of the Dragon.
George? Yeah. No, I wouldn't say consulting is really the right word.
He was in the writer's room, but
yeah, he kind of has like, so according to his contract, he doesn't have control over anything anymore. But as sort of a courtesy, the showrunners, both D&D and Ryan Condal, kind of left open, like, if you'd like to join the writer's room, you can, kind of opportunities for him, which he's sometimes taken advantage of and then sometimes hasn't. So he kind of has an open invitation, but it's literally like a courtesy thing. Like, they don't have to do it. They could at any time be like, no, but they don't want to look like dicks. Like, that would not be good for them.
That makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Was House of the Dragon closer to the source material than Rings of Power was to its?
Oh, I mean, Rings of Power is pretty fucking far from right, your Tolkien source material. Like, I wouldn't say there's anything like complete invention of like the origin of metals and adding new wizards and dragons and things like that. There's no like or like shifting people's births and by hundreds of years or thousands of years and like when they should exist. Like, nothing like that's happened.
Fair enough. Yeah. All right. I mean,
Yoystan, before we wrap this up, what would you say was your most favorite moment of House of the Dragon season 2? What did you like the most, and what did you dislike the most?
So I think like the most is it really takes its time with its characters, and you feel for them. Like when I assume everybody listening has probably knows the end of some of the characters, but I guess spoiler alert for those that don't want to know. But like when Damon dies and stuff, right? When that battle happens, it's gonna be devastating. And so they're putting in a lot of the groundwork for those character moments, and I'm very I appreciate that. They care. You can tell that they generally care about a lot of their characters. Now, I know that they're different, and Alicent's different, and Rhaenyra's different than their book counterparts. But I can tell that the writers here are very much trying to build them up in a particular kind of way, and I care about their characters. Right? I would say it was a little too slow. You can tell it's got a bit of the Hobbit problem, where it's trying to expand how much source material it has over how many seasons they want to do, right? The Hobbit should have easily been 2 movies, should not have been probably 3. And this seems like they're just trying to extend the seasons by maybe 1 more.
Oh, I was actually, I thought you had said something else, or meant something else when you said the Hobbit problem, because I think by accident you highlighted something that I actually think of a different Hobbit problem. I think in Rings of Power, that the hobbits have nothing to do. However, this is a Lord of the Rings story, therefore it needs fucking hobbits, and we need to spend some time on hobbits, but we don't have anything for the hobbits to do. And I think House of the Dragon suffers from the fact that this is a show about Rhaenyra and Alicent, but Rhaenyra and Alicent have nothing to do.
That's fair. I was actually talking about the Hobbit movies, like the trilogy, but that's a good point too. I mean, it feels like we're building too much to something. The fact that Damon was at Harrenhal, I was like, all right, any episode now, something's gonna happen. Here we go, and nothing really did. It was just a lot of build up. Hopefully, that
and in the source material, he participates in several battles, and they didn't put them in. I thought they were gonna do them, and he wasn't.
I don't know why they wouldn't.
Yeah. Because I guess they didn't have the money. Yeah.
They needed a series of bottle episodes with Damon, and they didn't have the money. So therefore, it's cheaper just to have him in one location where he's not really moving around with the same sets, same actors coming in and out. He only interacts with 2 people, Simon Strong and Alice, and yeah. So okay,
man, they could have done Damon's scenes over the course of a long weekend, for his whole season.
Yeah, pretty much.
Get in Alice Rivers, Simon Strong, and him, and okay, let's just bang this one out.
And what did you dislike the most, Yoystan? Because me and Preston had a lot to say about that. But what was not your favorite thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was that last bit. It was that they took too long without balancing it enough. They took too long to build. There wasn't enough happening, and I feel like they're just stretching out source material for some reason. Whenever I watch season 6 of Game of Thrones too, it does that too. It feels like the longest season in some ways.
Oh yeah, because it's the I call that one the Groundhog's Day season, because it's the same thing that happened in season 5, but again, there's a battle. Yes. There's a battle for Meereen again. There's a battle for the North again. Cersei is dealing with the faith again. You know.
Yeah. Totally. No, absolutely. Yeah, that is the kind of retcon season in some ways, or the redo season. Yeah. So I would say it would be that. Great on how they deal with their characters and trying to build them up. Not great on how much they stretched it out.
Yeah, for me it was I loved Damon in episode 2. Him and Rhaenyra, their just the character dynamics were great, and then the first half was great, and then the second half kind of dropped the ball. I just really hated that fucking vision thing with Damon and Alice. Me and Preston have discussed it so many times. It's people are gonna rip their hairs out, but he does not need a vision. What do you call it, Preston? A vision of the apocalypse to bribe him to support Rhaenyra.
Yeah, he's supposed to come to the decision on his own, or he should come to the decision on his own, and then he's just kind of forced into it by a apocalyptic prophecy.
Right. They really do lean into that prophecy. The subtlety seems quite removed, I feel like.
That's why I'm looking forward to Dunk and Egg and the Return of the Dagger. Fucking dagger and some more prophecy.
I don't think it's gonna be
fucking great.
Do you know about the fucking dagger? Like the this is my whole thing now with the fuck. Do you know about this? The dagger and how
it's just everywhere.
It's gonna be like the one thing that connects everything again. Yeah. So yeah.
That makes sense. They probably will do that. It's right. They use hobbits in Lord of the Rings to connect everything, even where hobbits shouldn't be.
Well, actually, no. For Rings of Power and Lord of the Rings, what really connects everything is kind of Sauron's helmet crown thing and the Balrog design. That's kind of what connects it, right? It's the same design.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the whole Morgoth's crown, we didn't get into. We don't need to, but it's just they're like, oh, we need the 3 Elven rings, and then we can kill him. I'm like, how do you know that? Where is that coming from? But yeah, no, you're right. It's little dumb things like that. I mean, how they presented Narsil, they're trying to rip off how they presented Anduril to Aragorn in the movies. Yep. It's just nothing can be original anymore. Everything's just a ripoff. I feel.
No, yeah, of course. Press, is there anything else you want to bring up?
No, I mean, we could probably joke around with Yoystan forever, but we haven't already joking around with him for an hour and 45 minutes. So I want to feel like...
do you boys mind if we wrap it up here?
Let's do it.
Sounds good.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to Yoystan for joining us as well. Yoystan, where can the audience find you besides the Men of the West YouTube channel? You have like social media or...
Yeah, I'm on X and I'm on Facebook as well. But honestly, YouTube's the best spot because all those other places are kind of heaps of not great things right now, especially X. So you can find me there. Thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, thank you for being on, and we'll see you all next time. Have a good one.